From the center of the galaxy, this is ForceCenter, a show about Star Wars, pop culture, and the ultimate adventure, life itself. I'm Ken Napzok.
I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
And I'm Jennifer Landa.
And we are here, finally, to begin our discussion on the Disney Plus Star Wars series, Ahsoka. Is it a little bit late? Well, yeah, you know the reasons why, but we're finally here to dive in. What's at stake in Ahsoka? And Joseph, we'll say up top before we get to even our A of the day, we'll explain more in a second, but this is not an episode by episode. This is an overall deep dive into the themes.
That is right. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but we basically just wanted to start our Ahsoka coverage with the thing that ForceCenter often talks about, which is the big ideas, but there is much more Ahsoka coverage to come.
That's right. And we want to remind you, as always, today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. A little bit later, we have our ForceCenter recommends an audiobook we think you should try out on us. We are on YouTube with our faces today, the first show public facing with all three of us running cameras, and we're happy to be here. And because of that, Joseph, we're going to dive right in. What's at stake in Ahsoka? Let's take a look.
That is right. We are excited to finally be able to thoroughly discuss Ahsoka. This is a show that featured roughly, about 8 things per episode that we would normally do a 2-hour episode about. So this is a lot to talk about in Ahsoka. Instead of looking at each individual episode, like Ken was saying, we're going to do a series of shows about Ahsoka. We'll cover major topics like Anakin's appearance, kind of a major thing, live action Thrawn, live action Rebels characters, the weird pulpy side of Ahsoka, all the witches and the whales, probably a Balin and Shin special, 8 episodes about Huyang, if I have my way personally, and much more. But like we said, we want to start with the ideas, the themes, what's at stake in Ahsoka, the why of the story. But before we dive into all those big themes and ideas, we're each going to share a quick summary of our journey with the show. I think we all loved some parts. I think we were challenged by some parts of the show. All of our initial viewing experiences was impacted by the strikes. We've all watched it again since the strike. So, Ken, I want to start with you. What's your arc with the show, your relationship with it?
Yeah, man, I was immediately challenged by the show, which, again, what the circumstances of the strikes and some of the stuff we already discussed on that reconnecting to Star Wars episode. And I think the first 3 episodes kind of were a slog for me to get through. Future rewatches might just begin on episode 4. But this was a show that brought a great amount of joy to folks. And at one point, after a few conversations I had in person, I've mentioned them on shows before with our old buddy Mike Black, my buddy the Outlaw Adam Knight, when his 10-year-old daughter is a big Ahsoka fan. When I had those discussions, it reminded me of why we've come together as a team on ForceCenter, of finding the parts in these things that you enjoy, letting other people have that joy and celebrate the reasons why, and also just engaging with what's presented to you. Really helped, and that helped on a rewatch. And I just was able to pull back and let that kind of be what this show is for me right now. And there's going to be future engagements and rewatches and discussions. And as always, I think having these discussions has changed my view on other parts of Star Wars that I might at first have not enjoyed. Colorful scooters, I don't like that. Now I do. Space whales, key to this show. I used to be on a lot of shows going silly space whales. That's not the case anymore. So I'm excited to continue my journey with Ahsoka.
Oh, that's great. And you did rewatch it, right?
I absolutely did rewatch it. We're not doing life adventures, but I did end up getting real sick, and I know you've been battling a sickness. Mine ended up being the sickness you don't want right now. I did end up finally after 4 years catching COVID, so I did sit and rewatch Ahsoka with a little bit of head fog, but I had my notes open, so I'm confident that I was able to pull it all out.
Well, I think some of the best parts of Ahsoka have a strange and dreamlike quality, so perhaps your fog added to the atmosphere that I enjoyed in Ahsoka. I'm going to share my thoughts real quick and then pitch to Jennifer. This one, Ahsoka, for me, was a roller coaster. There are things that I absolutely love about it and things that I'm challenged by. I think part of it was I was so excited for it when it started. I did a bunch of rewatches with my wife of kind of essential Ahsoka episodes. I was bummed that we couldn't record about it, but I did all of my normal rituals. I got all ready. I poured myself a little whiskey. I set out relevant action figures and took pictures of them. couldn't post them online during the strike, so I actually sent them to you guys, to Ken and Jennifer. Like, I'm not going to do this every week, but here's a picture. And I felt like it started so thrilling to me with the crawl and the Balin and Shin attack and the Sabine on the bike with the rock song. And then for me, as I know some other fans have experienced, there was a real pacing issue. And I got real frustrated until about part 4. And then I feel like some of the ideas started to come together. Some of the things started moving. Some of the stakes made better sense. And there were endless things that I loved about it. I loved Hu Yang, that Sabine's opening bike scene again with the space rock music. Love it. I love that this was a show led by women and weird aliens, which might not have happened if it did not grow out of animation. So I really enjoyed that. A thing I can't wait to talk about. We've been waiting in this New Republic storytelling era for justice for Leia and Mothma, that the whole New Republic isn't corrupt and have its head up its backside, but that Leia and Mothma are on top of it. So I love that. So much weird pulpy stuff. Balin and Shin, I think Iman Esfandi as Ezra is absolutely fantastic. The Anakin episode, one of my favorite bits of Star Wars. So there was a ton of stuff that I legitimately loved, but I fell a little bit into the dark side by focusing more and being affected more by the stuff that I was challenged by, which was the pacing and waiting, I think, too long for some of the emotional clarity of how the characters were feeling and why, and some of that stuff. So I struggled through the first watch, going up and down on a roller coaster. Sat down and I was sick earlier this week, but I wanted to write up the notes for this show before Thanksgiving, and I did a power rewatch, like 2 sittings, first 4, second 4, and I enjoyed it a lot more because I was able to fill in some of the information that I think was maybe withheld until too late. So I understood where the characters were coming from a little bit more. I still think there are some pacing issues, but it was fun for me because I think it's fine to have parts of stuff that we love in general, that we love, and parts that we're challenged by. And a thing that's always happened with Star Wars, when I had more issues with the prequels, I would kind of watch the parts I liked, and then I would kind of, almost laugh to myself about the parts I didn't like until I found myself liking them. And there's a couple of those longer scenes where Ahsoka and Sabine are both figuring out a puzzle in the first episode, where like I started like counting and timing Sabine's puzzle, and like felt like this is still criticism. I still don't like it, but this is how I get closer to it, is by accepting it, warts and all, having it as a valid criticism, but in the big picture, part of this whole oeuvre of Star Wars that I love. So finding ways to enjoy the parts that I criticize. So that's been my journey. Jennifer, what has been your journey with the show overall?
It's shocking to me to see when this show was released. It feels like a lifetime ago, and it was during the strike. And as I've talked about, I'm in SAG-AFTRA. And so I felt kind of like I was being a Jedi. It felt like I needed to remove myself from that attachment of Star Wars to honor my duty at being on strike. And it was a funny conflict that I had, where obviously, like, I live and breathe Star Wars, and felt like I was cutting out a piece of myself. I also didn't want to spoil moments for myself, so I didn't look at anything online. I fully removed myself from it. So coming back to the show, I only watched the first 2 episodes, and then I was like, no, I can't do this. So coming back to it this past weekend, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And I had a really hard time with the first viewing. It felt like coming back to school. I had my summer slump. I had lost a lot of what I had learned. And what I realized is I have to view this in a different way. Like I can't, it's not going to be like Book of Boba Fett, where I'm going to be drawn in by the characters. It's not going to be like Andor, where it's totally brand new, right? I need to kind of recall what I have learned and who these characters are following their journey. On the second time was when I really felt like I had settled in to that nerd bubble that we talk about. And it just felt like home. It was like, okay, I remember everything. I was watching things and trying to remember the character arcs and what does this moment mean? And rather than being critical of the pacing, which I had been initially, the second time around, it was just like, I'm just going to hang out with Sabine while she figures out this puzzle, right? I'm just going to hang out. And it just was a different approach. But it took months for me to get to this point. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think, as we said on our episode about reconnecting with Star Wars, which I realize maybe not everybody heard, I think Jennifer had brought up a really good point that our relationship with Ahsoka is with, I think, critical hats on of, you know, what our analysis is, fans and viewers and critics of pop culture. But it's also all tied up into everything that was going on with us personally in our own lives and how that intersected with the strike. So I think everything you're saying, Jennifer, makes a lot of sense because it is both analytical and also deeply personal.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Well, any other big picture thoughts before we dive into the big ideas?
I just want to say too that the three of us are all. This is a little bit of us showing that we're taking some of our own medicine that maybe we've lovingly provided other folks. That first viewing is not necessarily the true answer, either direction, right? I came out of Rogue One going the best thing ever. Then I had that lowered for me, and then I always say, you know, most people I know who love Last Jedi did not fist pump at Luke's death and go, got it. They had to sit with it. And this is a series that asks you to engage with it. It does, and there's a lot of great. Can't wait to discuss it. The final thing, and I'm jumping ahead in the theme discussion, but there's a big theme and a lesson that kind of emerges in the Master and Apprentice discussion in here, Joseph and Jennifer. That is about people making the right choices for themselves. This series made choices that were right for itself, and I would maybe not have done it. I'm not in this position to do it, obviously. So it's a lesson for all of us, and I'm happy to discuss it.
Yeah,
well
no,
said.
great point. With that, let's dive into the big ideas, the themes. So I wrote down some ideas and some questions. We're going to talk through those, and then we'll dig for more to see what else we want to talk about. And again, we just really want to, I guess I just really want to say, this is our overview on the big ideas. There are a million things in Ahsoka that I want to talk about, particularly when you get into some real specific character arcs, some of the Star Wars lore and the implications and the new galaxy. We'll do an episode on all that kind of stuff. So also just really want to caution people, this is not an episode about, this is our one and final statement about Ahsoka. This is looking at the big picture ideas, and we aren't even going to come close to scratching the surface of all the stuff to talk about in Ahsoka. So with that said, let's dive into the themes, the big ideas. The first one that I pulled out that I wanted to talk about, because I think it's what the show really leads with in the first few episodes, is what I'm calling longing for the lost. Feels to me like the overall plot and most of the characters are motivated by wanting to connect with things that are lost or ancient, individual people, family members, whole cultures that have been lost, whole galaxies that are only remembered in stories. Everybody is pining to get back to something lost. Specifically, Sabine wants to reconnect with her lost family member of Ezra. And I think arguably she is really pining at the beginning to reconnect with her lost Jedi Master, Ahsoka, her lost path as a Jedi. Hera is longing to reconnect with Ezra. Ezra himself is sitting there with his cool little turtle friends with the Victorian suits, the Noti, longing to return home. Almost all of his dialogue is home, 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 can't wait to get home, or a lot of his dialogue. Hu Yang, my buddy, my fave, Hu Yang is clinging to the protocols of this long-lost Jedi Order just because it's what he knows. Morgan Elsbeth, really compelling, wants to not only reconnect with the lost Grand Admiral Thrawn, but even more deeply with her lost community and culture of the Night Sisters. Balin's skull, we ultimately discover, is in pursuit of an ancient power he refers to as the beginning. How much more lost and ancient can it be than the actual beginning? And that's what Balin wants. The other galaxy we visit is ancient and lost. Our galaxy, the Star Wars galaxy, knew it before, but it's been lost. It's remembered only in stories and dreams. And it even feels like some of the New Republic's refusal to address the Imperial threat is, to me, a rush to get back to this lost past of the glory of the old Republic, where peace was kept for generations. And can we please just get back to that lost time as fast as possible, no matter what the consequences? So that's a little bit for me laying out of what I thought supported this idea of longing for the lost. But now I want to talk about the actual substance of it. So Ken, I want to start with you. How do you feel about this theme on a gut level? Does it resonate with you on a storytelling level, on a personal level? How does it hit you?
Yeah, it absolutely does. This is one of the things I think I was looking forward to in the series, this connection, this getting back to things. There was a pre-show release interview out there, and I think it was one of the last things we were able to talk about before the strike. I remember we talked about on the show about you could extrapolate from some of the stuff Filoni was saying that this was going to be a show about we called it like a post-COVID look at how do we all reconnect with our old lives, but find the new in that, and you got to move forward. You got what and what do you miss, and all those things. And I think that ended up kind of being true. And for me, there's an overall thesis statement for the show that is supported by these themes about how do you be a Jedi in these times and for all time. And it's the core of Ahsoka's existence as a character. I think Ahsoka's almost this rumination on what does it mean to be a Jedi. And Dave's going to put a lot of his thoughts on that into that character, good and bad. And she's made some hard decisions in her life. And we've seen her at different times be burdened by those decisions by doing what she feels is right. And either whether she's supported or not. And connection has always been at the center of that. She wants to connect with everyone in the galaxy that needs help. That's something we see her do a lot, but she seems to have sought out that at the cost of her own connections. Hashtag sad Ahsoka, and not just in this series, but other shows as well. There's the happy-go-lucky kid we met early on had that drummed out of for a lot of reasons, which the show goes into. So yeah, we go into the series. We knew the connection was big, and just the idea of finding what lies beyond big changes and how to return to that, how to return those various connections. It's something that's key to my life right now, and I have a lot of people, and I'm struggling with some things in my life about reconnecting and how do I do it and why do those connections die? And it's not just about swinging a laser sword, right? So that's why I love this kind of stuff and why I love coming to the Star Wars discussion table, finding where I'm at within this show, and that was a big overall thing that worked for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really great thing to say in a way that we tend to look at Star Wars. Is that one of the reasons I love it is it's this big mythic thing, but it can be applied to real life. And I will never be forced with the decision of, do I destroy the ancient map to the faraway galaxy and maybe save my friend, but also cause a war? I'm probably not going to be in that position. But that the conflict embedded in that moment can be translated, like we've jokingly said before, to like Christmas presents or sending emails. Like you can find that truth. And that's part of the reason that we're talking about these ideas, is because they can resonate on a real personal level. So for Jennifer, how did you feel about this big picture idea of looking for the lost? Did it resonate for you either as a story or on a personal level?
What I thought was interesting is that unlike a lot of other stories where characters are looking to the past, looking to things that they've lost, it seems like all these characters were interested in recapturing things that were lost from the past to create something new. And that was something new for me that I thought. What was also interesting was really Sabine's laser focus on recapturing the lost, like literally. It dictates everything that she does throughout this season. And it affects everyone around her. And there are times where I'm like, what are you doing? It feels selfish. And yet it's not, because she's trying to literally rescue someone, right? So I think that that's intentional because it shows her stubbornness and how that can be, it has consequences, and it can create danger, and it is a noble cause, but bad things can happen in pursuit of that noble cause. So that's what I thought was interesting for me with her character. And it was fascinating to see her kind of trying to bring everyone around her on board with this cause and see their struggles with it. And ultimately they were successful, but at what cost?
But at what cost? Yeah, it's a great question. And a thing that I was not actually raised in the show itself, to my recollection, having watched it twice and taken lots of notes. Sabine and Ahsoka were both asked to find Ezra too. So there's a fascinating discussion there between connection, duty, the balance, also about like personal responsibility to loved ones. If you make a promise to a loved one, in general, most people feel it's good to fulfill a promise to a loved one. So fascinating stuff to talk about there. For me, about this sort of connection to the lost, it is the personal and the individual, like Sabine's laser focus on rescuing Ezra. But the fact that it's just in this time, this whole galaxy has kind of in ache. And I think that really goes to what you were talking about, Ken, about the feeling that this is like the entire galaxy has been through a trauma, like our whole world has been through a trauma with the pandemic. And that feeling that something is out of place, something is going right. We're going back to all the things we knew and we're hitting all the notes, but is the music the same? The fact that almost all the characters were pining for something lost really resonated with me just as a mood. Because I thought it was sort of like the definition of bittersweet. And to me, in real life, when I'm longing for the past, it's bittersweet, you know, and I'm thinking like, oh man, I wish it was the late 90s and I was in my studio apartment playing GoldenEye and like, yep. And you didn't have your wife, you had all these bad things going on in your family and blah, blah. And in that longing for the past is always bittersweet. And I think the show is great about that, of dissecting. There are sweet parts of actual reconnection one-on-one with loved ones. Great, sweet, amazing. And then the bitter part, that the sort of obsession that the present can only be fixed by looking to the past. And I'm so excited to see Baylan's story return. But that's the bitter part of longing for the lost to me, where Baylan's like, I'm not even going to try to engage with the present. I'm going to seek out some mystical way to go back to the beginning. This is totally my interpretation. That just like, I'm going to access some mystical plane and reboot the bleeping galaxy, reboot the Force, wipe it, start again. That to me feels a little on the bitter side of, I cannot engage with the present. I can only look to the past to change everything to make the Force great again. Yeah.
There's a great interview clip out there going around. I read it in that Filoni was saying he and Ray would argue a little bit on set in that good way of creatives kind of hashing out the ideas, where Dave kept having to tell him, you're one of the bad guys. And he's like, Ray's, no, I don't think I am. I don't think I am. I was like, no, I can assure you, you are the bad guy. Your choice is should be something considered bad. But anyways, love that. Yeah. What is going 2 steps back, right? What is going 2 steps back? What is carrying forward the good parts into with your connections, and something that you rest, like the GoldenEye example. How do you reconnect with maybe what drove you back then, some of the creative freedoms, the passions, the worlds in front of you, you can accomplish it all, the good stuff. How do you connect with that while being in the present? I think is the center and key to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk specifically about Ahsoka, the title character, the titular character. So in my opinion, in my analysis, in contrast to most of the characters, Ahsoka begins her journey by she's open to reconnecting with Ezra. That would be a nice bonus, but she is mostly motivated not by connecting, but by stopping the return of something lost, stopping the return of Thrawn. Jennifer, do you agree with my analysis that Ahsoka's on a slightly different motivation path, not connecting, but stopping? And if you do agree with that, what's interesting to you about Ahsoka, the main character, starting with a slightly different motivation than almost every other character?
Right. I think it's consistent with the character and with the journey that she's been on, that we have seen. If you've watched the Clone Wars and Rebels, like, you've seen her take, and even it's consistent with like this nomadic life that she's leading. Her, I don't want to say rejection of attachment, but she certainly does seem to keep a distance from getting too attached to anyone. And I think that she cares about Ezra. It would be wonderful to rescue Ezra, but it's like the individual goal versus what is best for the greater good. What is going to affect more people? Thrawn returning is a much bigger is a threat. And so I think that she can put aside her personal feelings because that's what she's had to do time after time. Right. So yeah, I thought it was very consistent, and it makes for a complicated character. And the first few episodes were a little tough to watch because I'm like, come on. But that is true to who she is. So
yeah, I love your point about her being a nomad and somebody who's often been like, well, I'm sorry, everybody, but I got to go this way. And that's an interesting tension when you really look at just motivations in the first episodes. Everybody is motivated by connecting to the lost, except for Ahsoka, who's like, got to stop that.
Yep.
No connection to the lost. and stop it and resist it in terms of her relationship with Sabine. Ken, how do you agree with that take that Ahsoka is on a different motivation path? And if so, how do you feel about it?
I really like it. It's a focal point in this character who's long been one of my favorites. It's a busy intersection of one of the things I love with Ahsoka, and some of this I want to be sure to we'll bleed and move to the other parts of our discussion when we're talking about it. You framed it nicely, but this is a weird example. I just rewatched the movie Amelie this weekend. I love that film. Audrey Tautou, 2001.
Did you just hit the wrong button alphabetically trying to watch Ahsoka and ended up watching Amelie?
No laser swords in it, just wonderful shots of Paris. But that's a fantastical kind of romantic fantasy film that is someone who works so hard to make the good choice, makes a good choice to help everyone else and meet them with their needs and inspire change in them, and can't do it in herself. And the fears of that, and has to face the hard truths of the girl behind the glass and the and the painting. My COVID brain hitting me today. A lot of words popping up.
But you're doing a great pitch for the show Ahsoka, so I can't wait to see that.
And it connects to that, where Ahsoka has gone around and I think has made the makes the, we'll discuss this more later, but makes the right decisions for herself and for others, and real, like, this idea of Thrawn is the bigger issue. She wants to stop a war. That's sounds like a good idea. She knows what that does, and she knows what war does, and knows that simply for looking for Ezra might be leading with an attachment. And that's what I like about a lot of what the series. There's a lot of those questions that cause you to kind of analyze your own choices. And I think she finds that flipping the order in the end is key. Find Ezra, stop Thrawn versus stop Thrawn. And sure, I like him too. We'll get Ezra. And that's interesting to me. She starts the series sullen and driven to do what she feels is right, but learns that Sabine and others are in the same boat. And she ends up connecting with other people and their purposes, all leading towards the light, mind you, which is, we'll get into a little gray area discussion later, because I think there's still light and dark being at play here in all these decisions. Anyways,
absolutely. I think for me, I really like that. It's one of the things I like the most in the show, about that hinge of, why are we doing this? Even Ziono makes a point of it, of accusing Hera of, like, you don't want to stop Thrawn, you want to find Ezra. So having that be a hinge is really great, and really great for Ahsoka in particular, because I think it does set up her conflict, which to me is that she does fear attachment, and is almost not even she's well aware of it. It's not a buried thing. It's, I think the show also did finally put down some timeline clarity, that everything we've seen of Ahsoka in Mandalorian is before this, because of the timeline stuff that Carson Teva mentions, that Mandalorian season 3 has just happened.
Right.
So, her attitude toward Grogu was great clarity about attachment. The rejection of Sabine, we finally learned the first time around, is a fear of Sabine giving into attachment and in using the Force is a power for revenge, based on what happened to her family on Mandalore. So I like that she starts with this clarity of, like, I know I'm being a cold MFer. I know I'm basically channeling Mace Windu. It's my choice, and I'm sticking to it. There's a nice sort of a clarity and a sharpness to that. But I think part of the reason that I love the Anakin episode so much is I felt like, and we'll talk about this much more over this episode, maybe, or future episodes. I feel like Anakin's live or die is very literal about her choosing to fight for life. But to me, the way it resonated, whether it was intended or not, was Ahsoka is following her duty. She's making responsible choices, but she is killing herself. Everything is to be stopped, feared, cautioned, corrected. Nothing is to be lived, to be explored, to be risked, to be looked for another opportunity, until she pivots and after that meeting with Anakin. So I really responded to Anakin's live as a correction to her focus on everything is about stopping. And I do feel, like talking about it now, I get really excited, and I think it's great thematically, but I do feel like it is one of the challenges of the beginning of the show for me is it also adds to us feeling a little distant and cold from the main character. It's such a cool idea, and it makes so much sense to this character and to her history, but in a way, for me, it's almost too effective, where I feel like my old buddy Ahsoka is reaching out for the screen and also saying, like, I know you've gone on a long journey with me, but I don't want to be attached to you either. Back off. Back off, viewer. And it makes perfect sense with her whole journey, and for me, it makes her pop halfway through when she comes back to life. But it's really effective for her to start so opposed to connection.
Yeah, I love that too. We're not going to go too deep into things that we thought didn't work today, but I thought one of the things that did work was Ezra showing up later as a breath of fresh air, and even Huang having point of view and a certain energy that was a little bit of the lifeblood of the series that I think was lacking in the leads in the first 3 episodes. So it was starting an album with 3 depressing songs. Give me the rock and roller. I want to kick up here.
Well, Yang was on cowbell the whole time. I'm saying he was having some spark the whole time.
And you talk about clarity. The only joke I'll make is talk about this show providing clarity on timeline. Yet I loved Clancy Brown as writer is out. He going, we're here to celebrate something several years ago that happened. What's the anniversary? I don't know. Several years ago.
Don't pin me down, says writer Azadi. Any other thoughts before we move on this idea of longing for the lost? Jennifer, any other big picture thoughts on this theme or idea before we move on?
You know, it's interesting you brought up Ray Stevenson saying that arguing that he didn't see himself as a villain, because I think that's why he's so compelling to watch, is I really got sucked into every single thing he said. There was a moment, I think, when episode 6, when Shin asks him if he misses the Jedi Order, and the way he looks off, he looks so wistful, and he seems to, and then he catches it, and he's like, "No, what I'm believing or remembering is not true." Like, it's, you know, there's certain things that anyways, the point was, it felt like a Hamlet soliloquy. I was hanging on every word that he was saying, and it's just gut wrenching, because Ray Stevenson created this incredible character with his performance. He gave it so much life, so much complexity, and it's just so sad that he won't be back to reprise his role, because I want to see what he was going to do next with his character. So yeah, that's me longing for the lost.
I was going to say, that makes a ton of sense, and I hope that we get more Shin Hati as well. And I thought I would have taken more dialogue and a little more clarity on her, but man, did I enjoy her performance even more the second time around, when I knew, okay, this is as much as I'm going to find out. This is all about what the actor is bringing to the role, and I just loved how much she just looked like I mean this is a compliment, like a wounded animal who is going to cry and kill you in both at the same time. It's really powerful, really powerful. I think for me, on final thought on the theme of longing for the lost, and like Ken said, they'll bleed together. I do like it throws up all these questions, but I feel like on this theme about the longing for the lost, that it does end on a pretty solid Star Wars truth of we're all connected. People need friends. They need community. They need culture. There's a danger in obsessing over the past, but there's an absolute need for community and culture and connection and being with your people again. And I love how much the last several episodes are celebrating that connection, and it feels so alive when people reconnect. And I think having some amount of clarity at the end that Ezra's return is the victory, that creating possibility, that just a good Star Wars idea that helping people can be just as important as stopping the threat. It feels so light side, dark side of, yep, it is a part of the responsibility of a Jedi to stop the dark side. But by definition, the light side can't be entirely focused on stopping, destroying. That the light side has to grow and build and create. And I think that was to me, one of the most powerful parts of this idea of longing for the lost is some of it was a cautionary tale, but with Ezra, it was just a celebration. You know, I got teary when he's staring down Hera and saying, "I'm home." Just you know, really stripped to its core of how beautiful that is. Ken, any other thoughts on longing for the lost?
No, that's a lot of it. We'll move to the other discussion points, but I think, despite, you know, if subsequent episodes, we're gonna dive into maybe some things that didn't work for us in a way we haven't on ForceCenter before, to be honest. But one thing I love about that Man in the Cowboy Hat is I think these deep philosophical conversations are so valuable to Star Wars and always come back to 5 or 6 tenets of Star Wars that I love exploring. What you just talked about. How many times have we said on the show, light side builds, dark side destroys? That is a truth you cannot move away from. And a lot of the characters are even kind of wrestling with that here. And I think that worked for me.
Yeah. Balin to an almost comic level for me. I really liked some of those moments where he's like, "You are built of violence. Everything you do is violence. So I'm going to cut your head off." Anyway. So we're going to move on to this next big theme, and it does bleed over with the longing for the lost, and it is a very classic Star Wars and Jedi thing, but I think it's particularly powerful in Ahsoka, and it's this idea of choosing between connection or duty, Jedi in particular, but also a lot of characters really being forced to reckon with do you make this selfish choice of what would be good for you, or do you make some big sacrifice for the group, for the team? I think a lot of the show's tension lies in not just what the characters are doing, but the emotional reason. Like, you could be taking the exact same act, but everybody's being questioned about, we've all agreed that you're going to push that button and you should push that button, but we're all real upset about what's in your heart when you push that button. Kind of specificity of emotional reason behind motivations. Questions of, are they following the rules? Are they doing what's best for the group? Is their selfishness dangerous? So anyway, some specific examples. Ahsoka really wants Sabine to prioritize stopping Thrawn over saving Ezra. That's all about connection versus duty. Senator Ziono accuses Hera of crying wolf over Thrawn because of her personal desire to save Ezra. Ezra's hollow message to Sabine in the first episode reinforces this idea that Jedi must make difficult choices, and in particular, sometimes personal sacrifices like he did. Ahsoka is really wrestling with what level of connection is needed versus what is selfish and dangerous. One of the most fascinating to me is that ultimately Morgan Elsbeth sacrifices herself for the greater good of Dathomir. One of the better lines and exchanges for me when Thrawn says for the Empire, and she says for herself, to herself, for Dathomir. Really, really powerful choice in connection versus duty, selfish versus sacrifice. So, Jennifer, do you enjoy this theme? Does it resonate, being caught between the personal desire and your duty or your responsibility?
I mean, it's certainly cathartic to watch these characters wrestling with that. And obviously, like you're saying, like, I'm never going to be dealing with these types of things, stopping a war or saving my friend. But you know, it's fascinating to watch. And I think it resonates because it's what adulthood is, right? Is honoring my duty, putting aside my feelings, putting aside maybe time with friends, time with family to do what I think I need to be doing. And so it causes me to reflect on finding that balance. How do you find that balance? Especially when you think that you're doing something for the greater good. What I'm doing, this is for the better of the world, creating my art. Is it? Maybe it's better to just focus on these personal connections with your family and friends, right? So anyways, yeah, I feel like I was Ahsoka on this journey.
Yeah, I think it's great. I feel pretty strongly as a personal philosophy that we absolutely should be there for other people, but we also must be there for ourselves. And I think sometimes we are too quick to label ourselves selfish, because if we are not somewhat joyful, if we don't feel some amount of agency or power, how can we be on our balanced and on our best foot forward to be there for other people? So that I always am really interested in this idea in Star Wars, because taken to extremes, obviously I think make sacrifices, don't be selfish. Those are good things. Absolutely. But I feel like Ahsoka is a little bit of a cautionary tale of what happens when you go too far with that. And it's kind of challenging myself on a personal level to be like, okay, when's the most recent time you felt that? And I realized, oh, this weekend, this Thanksgiving weekend that just passed. My wife and I had a long list of things we wanted to do. Some of them were career stuff. Some of them were for the comfort of our home, reorganizing things. But then on the list was like, we have to order all the family holiday presents now. And I get too Ahsoka about it. I get too detached and just being like, I'm good at figuring out what presents people want. I'll figure it out. It'll be fine. I can do it in 2 hours. Why are we talking about this? Let's go. They're in the Amazon cart. What the hell's the problem? Let's go. But the why of Christmas presents is connection. It's sitting there and thinking about the other person and thinking about, do I give them something that I think they just want? Or do I give them something that's also a part of me? So I can say, this is why I gave this to you. And it's a bridge between us. And I took a deep breath and like, I'm not going to rush this. I'm going to slow down and think about it. And I was thinking about that, the difference between just duty for the sake of I'm doing a responsibility. I have no emotion involved. Let's get it done versus can't really be responsible and sacrifice and be somebody who supports the idea of being there for other people unless I let myself be emotionally involved in it on some level. And that was the powerful way that I thought about it being personal. Ken, how do you feel about the connection versus duty theme? It's everywhere in Star Wars, but really present in Ahsoka. How did you feel about it this time around?
It's everywhere, and this series does succeed. Hits a high bar, I think, in making you not in agreement with almost anyone making a point in this show. Right?
I am nodding in agreement with that point. That's a really good point.
Right? Everything is you know, it makes sense, right? And that's not saying here everyone or anyone is gray, which is a big personal sticking point that maybe I have to move past. But the idea of that, see, it's all just the shade of gray. No, the gray is just maybe the color you move through before you make a choice, light or dark. It's just saying that these are all complicated, multiple truths. That's been this big thing in my life, and looking out at both my life and looking out at the world is. There's multiple truths that we all have to navigate in life, right? And this is why, you know, I'll take a hard stand if anyone tells you Star Wars in present day is only about Star Wars. I just think they're incorrect. There's so many ideas at plays in these shows. Yes, they're referencing Star Wars, and it might help if you know this was a series that. It might help if you know a lot of Star Wars that came before. That's the thing we can have in another episode. It's a discussion for another time. But this is about things that are relevant to our life. There's a big push these days. Mental health is a big a big push. And so, hey, maybe you might need to take a day off at work from work because that is something you need and that makes you stronger for everyone else. But maybe Black Friday is not the day to do it because then you're letting down 15 other people. And how do you navigate that? Both are truths. You might feel you have a right to defend yourself when attacked, and I think maybe you do. But how do you do it? Is it justice or vengeance? Is it you want to stop Thrawn? Great, but you're really doing it because of Ezra, and you're going to cost us. You're going to cost the Republic in this thing if you do it this one way. And I'm not saying Giano was right, but there was a couple times where I was, you know, Giano was like nodding my head. You know, he's getting a bad rap here, but I think he's being right. Yeah. And then
you're going down a path I cannot follow. I did not nod in agreement with Giano.
Yeah, you know, but he's probably got budgets and ledgers and things to look at that you know Hera doesn't, and that's the reason I think Mothma had to play smart, but that's the point is there's multiple truths at play, and a lot of it comes back to Baylan. That's a great point to discuss about. I can't wait to get into more about Baylan here in this episode and other episodes where you're a lot of times like, yeah, absolutely. Oh, that ain't right.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agreed with Giano's concern. Like, yeah, you want to make sure that a government official is not doing things for a personal reason. It just seemed like Giano was being quite the hypocrite that he had his own attitude and agenda. So you're right. I take it back. He had a valid point. You should question that. I don't agree with the way he did it. Anyway, well, welcome to Giano Center, where we're
but all jokes aside, that's exactly my point. I think you're absolutely right. Dude, you've got a personal vendetta here.
and paired with the utter denialism
Yeah.
Or if you believe the conspiracy theories, he's working with the Imperial Remnant, and like what? But we could have that discussion on later Xeonocenters. I think one thing I just wanted to mention here about the rewatch is I did find the rewatch richer because I feel like there's just there's such an awareness of the connection versus duty. It's everywhere. It's the plot of the show. It's not subtle.
Yeah.
But one thing that just pinged for me when I rewatched is there's that initial mission that Ahsoka and Huyang are on, where Huyang kind of chides her about, you need connection, you need an apprentice. I'm not an apprentice. But like out of the gate, the dialogue between Ahsoka and Huyang is about whether Huyang was doing a good job rescuing her from the explosion. And Ahsoka says, if you didn't keep at such a safe distance, maybe we wouldn't have lost communication. And Huyang says, I'm just following standard Jedi mission protocol. So just bickering about an action scene, it's like already both these characters are wrestling with this idea of, is it safer for us to stay closer, or should we keep our distance and be cool? So I wanted to share that one. Before we move on to the next question, Jen, where do you think Ahsoka ends up for herself in trying to find the balance between connection and duty?
I think that what's interesting, something that I did not expect, was that she finds that balance through her connection with Anakin. And I just have to say, like, I knew, I'd seen online that Anakin had come back, had returned. Right, and I just was like, oh no, right? Because I was worried it was going to take me out, whether it was the effects, the de-aging, his voice, whatever. I didn't know. And I have to say, it was freaking so good. I thought the de-aging was excellent. I thought Hayden's performance was awesome. That is really tough to be able, and I don't know how much of it was modified, right? Like vocals or whatever. I thought it was pretty darn pitch perfect to where his character was from where we last saw him on screen. Well, I guess that would be, Kenobi. But you know what I mean? Like, I just thought that it was just, it fit right. I thought that he did great playing both the light and the dark of it. And just overall, I thought that whole storyline was really, really compelling. And it was fascinating that she did have such an emotional attachment to him. That was really the only time that I felt like we really saw her in the earlier episodes kind of coming alive, was in her interaction with Anakin. But yeah, that was bravo visual effects team and Hayden Christensen.
Yeah. I think he was really well lit for the majority of the episode.
Yes.
The cliffhanger episode where he smiles, like you could see some tech there. And then a lot of it was just, I think, really well lit to be like, we're not shining bright lights on his face where the de-aging has absolutely nowhere to hide.
Lots of clouds, a lot of smoke in those flashbacks.
So dreamy. I loved it.
Right.
Loved it. Yeah, I mean, I really want to do a full Anakin episode, but it's really great to see Hayden Christensen be able to play whatever you think is happening, whether you think it's Ahsoka's imagination, whether you think that is Force spirit Anakin, whatever you think. I think the way Hayden Christensen played it is the complete character.
Yes.
Everything that Anakin and Vader has ever been or could be, he got to play. And man, I thought he knocked it out of the park. I think for me, where Ahsoka ends up in trying to find the balance, I totally agree with you that it is entirely defined by her relationship with Anakin. But I really like that. I feel like Ahsoka is wrestling with, she starts out very compassionate. Then she sees what Anakin's compassion does when it curdles into obsession and it drives him to the dark side. And she pushes away compassion and connection. And she kind of knows she shouldn't. Huyang is on her. Hera is on her. I think she's on herself because she wants to be there for Sabine. She wants to defeat the curse and make Sabine a great Jedi. She wants to connect. And she's looking for a way to frame it in her own mind of, what is a safe way for me to connect that I don't have to be afraid? And I think that epiphany she has that, oh, it's not about light and dark. It's not about Anakin's past. It's just, how do I define my role to Sabine? And my role is be a mentor, be a parent. That's what Anakin was for me. That line at the end where she's like, I realized everything else that Anakin was, he was a great master because he just was always there for me. He patted me on the back when I did well, and he picked me up when I fell down. And I feel like that's like this unlocking for her of like, my job isn't to change Sabine or stop her from hurting herself or others. It's just to be there. It's just like Ahsoka was like, oh, I can have connection if I'm a real good parent. There's Ken and I always go on about this episode of Bad Batch, an early episode of Bad Batch, where Hunter in particular is wrestling with like how to keep Omega safe, and he encounters some parents, and they were like, you're not going to keep your child out of danger. You're going to be there for them when they are in danger, because they're beings and they're going to make bad choices and they're going to run into things they shouldn't. And you have to be there for them. You can't always stop them. And so strangely, watching Ahsoka, I was like, and this is that lesson from Bad Batch showing up again. So I feel like she finds some great resolution. And I think it's in a great contrast to some of the other connection versus duty relationships. Just want to throw out there quickly, and I want to get your thoughts, Ken. I love that Ahsoka learns this lesson of like, oh, maybe all of this was fated to happen. There's even that line of Sabine was never going to make any other choice. It's who she is. She was always going to choose this, no matter how much training she had. This is who she is. And Ahsoka gets to this point of like, I don't need her to be perfect. I don't need her to make every choice that I would make. I just need to be there for her. Great contrast with Baylan and Shin, where Baylan just rides up and is like, come to accept that you want different things. So bleep off.
Right.
I'm going to abandon you because our needs aren't aligned enough. And in contrast, Ahsoka's like, I know you're different, Sabine, and I'm going to be there for you, even though you're different. So, Ken, what are your thoughts on where Ahsoka ends up with the connection and duty challenge?
Yeah, after the break, I think we'll dive into a lot more of Mr. Baylan and his beard and reading the tea leaves between them. I think what you're saying is great and powerful and resonates a lot in the real world, and even in our own lives. This is a battle, as other center during the strike occasionally turned into mom center when I was working through a lot of things in my past. This is an argument.
You were not alone. It was all of us.
Working on what I describe as negative attachment. It's like, yeah, I know you love me. Yeah, I know you want me safe. But I think you want me to do everything that you'd want to do because you're afraid of how you'll react if my choices hurt me. So you're not concerned about my well-being first. You're concerned about yours. But it's not evil or nefarious or selfish. It's just your protective nature here. It's leading with fear. And I think Ahsoka reaches a wonderful let go point based on a lot of what you're talking about here, Joseph. This is the choice to live versus the choice to die. Save what you love, not fight what you hate is a powerful thing. And that's why we love a lot of the philosophies behind The Last Jedi, because they connect to the heart of Star Wars. And I think there's a great point that you've already mentioned, and I think we'll talk more in the Master and Apprentice thing of her just going, got it. Anakin ended up bad in a lot of ways, but that's not the legacy that I have to completely engage with, I guess is the way I would look at it. But she discovered what she'd overlooked or what she'd forgotten, or what his real strength as it relates to her. And then the fear that you're only going to take the bad forward. No, she's going to take that good. And just realizing that great Huang line of, paraphrasing, but Sabine's doing this, making the decision that's right for her. And that's a powerful moment to let go of that. As long as Sabine's decision wasn't wipe them out, all of them, as long as, again, that's why I go to the light and dark of it all. But this is her. Perhaps this is a decision that's right for her. And the moment you have that, like, I made a rather huge decision in my life, and Anakin stood by that decision. Despite his own fears and despite him saying, hey, maybe I'd like to, blah, 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 that great, wonderful conversation at the end of Clone Wars Season 5. But I made it, and he supported me. She's making this. I'm going to support that. It's a powerful let go moment.
Ahsoka even has that great line to Hu Yang when she's frustrated with Sabine's training of like, I'm not trying to make her be a Jedi. I'm just trying to help her be herself. It almost feels like Ahsoka kind of knows what she needs to know, but Ahsoka keeps getting in her own way with all these strict rules that she has for herself. So any other thoughts, Jennifer, on this idea of connection versus duty?
I don't have any at the moment. Yeah, because we're going to be getting into the Master and Apprentice parents later.
Yes, Jennifer, sorry to go on and on about what a parent's role is. If at any point you want to say, I disagree, since you're the actual parent and I'm not, by all means, please.
No, I'll save it. I'll save it.
Okay. Yeah. We got some more mom center coming after the break, I think. Ken, any other ideas from you on this idea of connection versus duty?
It's wonderfully powerful. Meaning, what I mean by that is even on the rewatch, it's a messy reality in a series, in a franchise that is about light and dark, that is about there's good choices and bad choices, but we all destiny takes us to those choices. This is a series that crawled around in the mud a little bit and made you rethink some stuff, right? And this is even some of the, the Tales of the Jedi series we love, and that was something from Filoni's mind of just that Dooku and Qui-Gon stuff is so powerful because it's not going suddenly. Yeah, you're right. Dooku was 100% correct. He was the good guy. He's the grandfather of the rebellion. If you look at it from a certain point of view, no, he had he had a righteous beginning that turned to a self-righteous end, and powerful stuff. And there's, again, going to that nodding along the way. There's so many times, even Thrawn, I'm in the camp of Thrawn is 100% bad, not chaotic evil. He's bad, but everyone's motivations are real in this series. And I think that was a big success of it.
Yeah. A person that I nodded along to is Hera. And that's my final thought on this is I think Hera has a line that feels up to a point boilerplate, but watching it again, it really popped for me as a lesson on the idea of connection versus duty. I feel like Hera is often a character who is coded as finding the balance. She's a mother figure in Rebels, and she's often there for people literally physically with the ship, or the one who knows what's bothering everyone and taking on the emotional burden in somebody who has really been in a place to have to make all these decisions. So there's a conversation that she has with Mothma after she kind of gets cleared for the mutiny. And Mothma's like, okay, don't lie to me that you have a personal attack. What's the real situation? What's the real problem? How much do we have to worry about Thrawn? And Hera has this great line. She says, we have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And that line just kind of came across as, yeah, it's pretty straightforward in the context of that conversation. But in the context of this theme, and what the other characters are wrestling with, it just really hit me of a balance between connection and duty, a balance between the fear of what could happen with Thrawn and the joy of what could happen with Ezra. And it feels like we have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best is good balance. And in the first half of the show, Ahsoka's like, we have to prepare for the worst. And Hera's like, and what else? And Ahsoka's like, nothing else. Just prepare for the worst. And that's all we need to do. So that line really resonated with me.
Yeah.
Great one. All right. We are going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be back with more Force Center and Mom Center. But first, we got a recommendation, right, Ken?
That is right. We're going to have an audiobook we think you should try out on us. And Joseph, this is one that I know you recently finished, but we are recommending Path of Deceit, which is the beginning, correct me if I'm wrong, the beginning of Phase 3, right?
Phase 2 of the High Republic.
Oh, see, I'm so confused, but I need to go back.
I jumped back to Phase 2, and I finally got started. I read that book, and I really enjoyed it. It was a slow burn that has a real good burn, so I enjoyed it very much. If you're behind on High Republic, I suggest checking it out.
Checking it out and download your free audiobook today by going to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Once again, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. All right, quick break. The other side, more deep diving into the themes of the Ahsoka series. We'll be back here on ForceCenter. Welcome back to ForceCenter, a show about Star Wars, pop culture, and the ultimate adventure, life itself, and a deep dive into themes. This has been fun for me so far. I wasn't sure 2 months ago how this would go because I was working through a lot of things, not just in Star Wars, but life. And my life in the last couple months has been about connection. How do I get back to things like that? Can I just watch football again? Do I have to analyze why or why I don't know? I'm just going to watch it. It's been an interesting journey, and this show ended up falling right into that lap. So, Joseph, this has been fun. Let's dive even deeper.
Yeah, I have missed talking about the big ideas, and I'm so enjoying nodding along to all the great points. But this third theme that I pulled out, I think, again, it overlaps and combines with the ones we've been discussing. But I think it was focused enough that it really deserves a specific conversation. And that is the idea of the master and apprentice. And I think within that, this idea of needed connection versus dangerous cycle. There's a lot of people who are concerned with breaking the cycle. By definition, a chain of masters and apprentices over decades and eons is a cycle. So I thought there's this great kind of contrasting, not just the fear of what is good and what is bad about the master and apprentice relationship, but also contrasted with the number of people like, we can't have another war. Balin's view, in my opinion, of let's reboot everything. So to highlight a little bit of how I think this plays out in the show, some of this analysis comes from what is in the show, most of it, but I'll be honest that some of it also comes from what the creators have explicitly said. Filoni discussed at Star Wars Celebration a lot how important this specific idea was to him. The almost spiritual idea that in Star Wars lore, an individual Jedi possesses all the strengths and weaknesses of their entire line of masters and apprentices. And you can take that as just, yep, we're all not only created by what our parents teach us, but what their parents taught them, and on and on and on. To me, there's almost a spiritual level in the way that Filoni talks about it. Of we're not just watching Ahsoka, we're watching Obi-Wan, we're watching Qui-Gon, we're watching Dooku in the chain. So I am affected by how much we see that play out in the show because it's so clearly important to him. Some evidence of this theme in the show. Arguably, the central relationship in the show is Ahsoka and Sabine struggling to solidify their master and apprentice relationship and to be there for one another and find balance in it. Anakin explicitly tells Ahsoka that she contains the best and the worst of him and all of the people who have trained him. Huyang is crystal clear in that beautiful Huyang way that a master needs an apprentice, even commenting that Ahsoka comes from a long line of non-traditional Jedi, again emphasizing that lineage. Balin molds Shin to be, quote, something more than a Jedi, but ultimately abandons her for wanting something different than he does, a different master and apprentice relationship. The great master and apprentice relationship, ultimately great, but we got to see it be rocky, between Kanan and Ezra, is really celebrated with Ezra's new blade honoring his mentor. I think a really great scene that celebrates that great connection in a good master and apprentice relationship, which also makes Sabine feel bad about hers. So there's an overview. Jennifer, did any of these master and apprentice storylines resonate in particular?
I mean, I didn't really see myself in any of these relationships, which was kind of new for me. I also think it's kind of different for Star Wars because there was so much like, I don't want to say abandonment, but I was shocked when Balin just like left Shin, basically. That was surprising and yet kind of not for the character. Ahsoka's distance at the beginning, like we've talked about, it was a little challenging to deal with that. I feel like for me, the master apprentice relationship in Star Wars has been so much about like more on the apprentice, like Luke struggling, the master is there encouraging, coaching them on, and it's the apprentice that's like, I can't do it, or whatever. So this kind of flipped it. I feel like there was a lot more about the master not being able to hold their end of the deal, so to speak, right? So yeah, that was fascinating, and it's something that I'm going to continue watching the show and continue looking at these little moments. I mean, there's every line, like you're saying, every line you can read something into it. It is a very dense show, which makes it fun to watch over and over again.
Yeah, and I think it to its credit and sometimes to its challenge, it throws a lot of questions in the air. And like, Ken, I think you're great, nodding along with everyone. And even the characters sometimes kind of saying one thing, but kind of doing another. It throws a lot of questions up. So I think it gives itself a lot to be discussed and parsed through. Ken, did any of these Master and Apprentice storylines resonate with you in particular?
I loved it. I loved them all, and the Balin stuff I go back to a lot, and we're going to dive into here. But Jen, you said something that kind of made me. I want to add a little bit more to my overall answer here. I think what is one of the big themes behind Star Wars? What is one of the big ideas behind Star Wars? Get out your ForceCenter bingo card. It is the balance between the old and the new. Generational change. It's the key to so much of the story, and I think a lot of that is at play here. But what you said, Jen, just made me think about, yeah, it maybe is a little different than expected, or played a little different, because it's almost like we got to hang out in the teacher's break room.
Yes.
And we got to hear the teachers going, God, these kids,
Right.
God, they're trying my patience. It's like going for a hike with parents and the kids aren't there, right? It's just
Right.
like,
I like the idea of like, it's the scene in Empire Strikes Back where Yoda and Obi-Wan are complaining about Luke, except that's the series now.
Right.
and again, and that can sometimes challenge us, and that's a good thing. And I think what you're saying, Jen, is, yeah, it challenged me. It wasn't what I expected. Maybe it was not what I wanted. I didn't see myself in that, so I got to find out what's there. But I go back to, again, I think this is my third or fourth Last Jedi reference. I'll try to stop them now. But when Luke shows up a little bit different than maybe what folks wanted or expected, or even at times needed, that can challenge you. But it's still these characters on this journey. And you're working through that with them. So I love this. It resonated in a sense that they were frustrating. I was frustrated too, very frustrated. I was like, Huang, like, could you two just listen to him and work together? It's pretty simple.
They never listen.
Right.
They never listen.
I love, and David Tennant is obviously one of our best actors, and the fact that he recorded this before and so they could have his voice on set and all that process is good. But anyway, I have to. What I'm saying is, I was frustrated, especially the first 3 episodes, and that might be what you said, Jen. Might be why more than I realized. But I had to meet the show and these characters where they are at. And Huang said this relationship between a master and apprentice is as challenging as rewarding, or the relationship. And I think that this series, we spent a lot of the time in that challenging arena, and I think that's at the core of Dave Filoni's interest, because it does feel back into the big idea that's present so much of Star Wars, the old and the new. And Joseph's right. We got to see, a lot of us, our generation specifically, we got to see Obi-Wan Kenobi going, finally, I'm here to pass this on to Luke. Now we get to go back and see him going, I don't want to pass it on to anyone. I don't know who I am anymore. So that's part of what's at play here for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've got, some master stories with Luke's journey in The Last Jedi, and with Obi-Wan's feeling, working through in the Kenobi show, his failure, but that was so focused on his failure, which is a part of the master story, is sometimes you're going to fail. I think what was really powerful to me about the Ahsoka story is, I felt, shamed is too strong of a word. I felt like Ahsoka, we kept wondering how she was going to feel about Anakin's fall. And I was making that a lot about Anakin. And we often had conversations about, like, what if she had this great campfire talk with Luke? And Luke says, hey, you know what? He made a better choice at the end of his life. And wouldn't that make Ahsoka feel great? But that was all about Anakin. And I didn't give enough thought to Ahsoka. So the idea that she wasn't feeling bad about Anakin's choices, what she was wrestling with was, what does this mean for me? I am the fruit of the poison tree. If I am everything that he was, am I capable of such violence and horror? Am I capable of passing that on to Sabine? If I couldn't help my master from falling to that, how am I going to be able to help Sabine from falling to that? The fact that this story was so totally about her pain and feeling like I am the product of a flawed system a flawed lineage. I was grateful to that because I think it made it all about Ahsoka, and not just that she is an extension of Anakin, who's rooting for him on the sidelines of, oh, you made a better choice at the end, so that now I'm great. Like at first I was like, well, okay, so in the timeline she's communed with Luke. She's been there on the planet watching the new Jedi start and all that. Like, why doesn't she feel a little better about this Anakin stuff? And I really like that answer being because she was like, okay, great, that was Anakin's life, but now I have to reckon with how much it's going to control who I am and what I do. So that set up everything that made the Anakin episode so beautiful of you're more than that because I'm more than that. The comment from Anakin.
Yeah. I love the idea that she fears, she carries the good and the bad of Anakin. And so she naturally is going to fear that especially if Sabine might be motivated by vengeance, would carry that. I mean, it's like sitting right in front of her. Right. And also connects with some of the Grogu stuff of, hey, if he don't want it, I ain't going down this path.
Yeah. And she does seem a little more Springer's step when we see her again in Book of Boba Fett. But I think, as we've talked about, all of her reaction to Luke is like, you chose to train Grogu. Best of luck. I told you about that attachment, and Armor Daddy's here. And there's even that parting when Luke kind of asks her for advice, and she kind of doesn't answer and just says, you're a lot like your dad. And then she's leaving, and Luke's like, will I see you again? And she's like, we'll see. So even though her mood is a little brighter in that Book of Boba Fett episode, she is still clearly really pushing back on connection and attachment. So I felt like I was happy that got clarified. I really love all these ideas with Ahsoka. We'll talk about it more, but I do feel like I would have liked a little bit more in the early episodes to really. I feel like I knew intellectually everything that she had been through, but I would have liked to feel it again a little bit more. But we'll talk about that more down the line. Any other thoughts on Ahsoka's journey in particular before we move on?
I have some, but Jen?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
So let's move on to this specific question then about Ken. How do you feel about this idea of a master and apprentice as a metaphor for real life, for mentors and students and parents and children? When you're looking at this master and apprentice thing, I assume that you are taking it on some sort of personal level and not just a theoretical space fantasy level.
Yeah. And for me, I kind of had to look at it from that angle. I was a little distant in some of the things presented in the show. So it was distant from me. But yeah, I think in completing this Anakin and Ahsoka circle in a way, it just reminds us all, and I'll say it in terms of Anakin and Ahsoka, but I think it applies to his life. But all right, he was bad. He was one of the greatest evils in the galaxy, but he chose that. He chose he made those decisions based on who he was, but he was also good at one point. And he stood by you, and in doing so helped make Ahsoka who she is then. And that's something that I can pull out to my own life. There's a lot of things I fear that I carry forward. Just genetics and genes and hardwiring. And I'm constantly at war with that. And I'm constantly just shrugging and going, I guess this is the way it is. This ain't going to change because this is who I am. And I've got to make a choice to break that and break those cycles and move forward and then also for those coming up behind me. I'm not a parent, Jen. We lean on you for that advice, but I try to be a mentor to people, and a lot of it is, some people want to chat with me because they like what I've done, but I always want to say, let me show you what I haven't done, so that you can make the better choice for yourself and go forward. And that's something that's we always in the Clone Wars report, we always had the Coach Ken section whenever I thought it's a baseball coach kind of stuff from my past. And I think a lot of that was present here in good and bad ways. And I love going back a little bit to the Ahsoka thing. I do love that revelation. I do love seeing it from her eyes, seeing the whole Anakin journey, and it frees Anakin in a way, right? In her mind. Again, I love the question of what was real, what was there, what was of the Force, what wasn't. We can discuss it at some point, but the facts, the emotional facts remain, right? And so when Wang points out that Sabine is making the right choice for her, and again, keeps with the light side on the choice, it's just such a strength. And it's not unlike Ahsoka leaving the Order, obviously. So Ahsoka standing by Sabine to help her who she is just a powerful lesson. that I'm going to try to make sure I keep to and understand in my own life.
Yeah. Yeah. And lots of great stuff we can talk in more detail too about not just Anakin's fall, but the fact that she feels she was trained to be a warrior and that's her only role, I think ties in really well to her sort of knowing I'm overly obsessed with stopping, with preventing, with controlling, because I was trained to. That's all I was trained to do, was to fight in a negative way, not fight in a positive way for possibilities and connection and all that. Jennifer, how do you feel about Master and Apprentice in Star Wars as a metaphor for real life parents, children, mentors, students?
What I think is interesting is, now that you guys are talking about this, I really do see the parent-child relationship. You know, with like Obi-Wan and Anakin, it felt like he was an older brother for me throughout so much of that. But when you really think about, as a parent, what your job is for children, is obviously you have a lot of ideas on what they should do and what they should not do. You have all this wisdom that you want to impart on them, and they don't want to take it. And you learn after a certain point that the best lesson learned is a lesson not taught. And sometimes kids have to figure it out for themselves. And the best thing you can do is let your kids know that you will be there for them, even when they make bad choices. That's when I really see all the different parent types, the parental figures in Ahsoka. The Balin figure, the father that's just like, I'm out of here. I can't be a father to you anymore. Some of us have had that experience. I love my dad. But you know, so I think that it's something that I had never really thought of, like with the master apprentice relationship, is how much it mimics the parental figures. I mean, obviously, professionally, mentors are an important thing. Personally, it's a great thing to have someone who's there supporting you, guiding you. But yeah, being a parent is tough. And one last thing I'll say, the whole thing about Ahsoka realizing that she does have the best and the worst of Anakin. As a parent, you realize that, like you're saying, Ken, that is just within you, how you were raised, that DNA. And when you're trying to parent your child, it will come out in ways where you're like, that's my mom. And that's not the best. That's not the best thing that I want to do. I want to change that. It is so hard to change that hardwiring as a parent. And I imagine if you're, mentoring or a master of a Jedi, of a Padawan, that'd be just as challenging.
This is how hard it is. I heard my back's always hurt, but I have extra hurt it last couple of weeks, and plus being sick. I was shuffling in the backyard to go get my dogs, and I was like, "Oh, this is my grandpa shuffle." Like, listen to what my grandfather did towards me. And that's how hard wired you are, right? And that includes a lot of the things firing in your brain, and that's part of the struggle.
Yeah. This really hit me in a couple ways, I think. From being a creative mentor, sometimes people have, over different parts of my career, asked for advice. And it feels like this invitation to just go, celebrate my victories, warn about my failures, And I was really aware of that, and really always wanted to ask people first, well, what do you want? Because I could tell you a bunch of stuff that may or may not be helpful about my victories and failures. But ideally, as a mentor, what I want to do is help you do what you want to do. And maybe some of my victories or failures might inform the path that you're on, but I don't want to assume that you're trying to do what I did. So I think that sort of Sabine's, or rather Ahsoka's clarity at the end of I should just be there for Sabine rather than trying to entirely mold her, felt validating about good choices I feel I've made and want to make as a mentor. But then a little bit more on the being in Ahsoka's shoes, where she's the adult, she's the master, but she's reckoning with is her childhood, is with her father figure of Anakin. And welcome back to Mom Center. I sometimes wrestle with, my mother gave me an absolutely great start in life, and I have all sorts of stories I've brought up on ForceCenter of wonderful things she taught me. And then, without going into too many details, as we've touched on, she went to the dark side when I hit my teen years and became extremely damaging and controlling. And there's a tendency to say, if I'm going to be honest about the bad things, I have to reject the good things. because it's fruit of the poison tree.
Mm-hmm.
And this show is nice to be that, like, I didn't really expect ever for Hayden Christensen to grumble lines that would help me feel better about my relationship with my mother. But that's the power of Star Wars. That's what happened. Is like, yeah, it does not have to be all in one. It's, you know, I can value the good and the bad choices that my parents made and learn from the bad ones. And the fact that there were bad ones doesn't mean that I can't value the good ones.
This is taking your very real world point and going back into the Star Wars of it all. But that's one of the things I enjoyed about Hayden getting to come back, as Jen, you mentioned it, that he was wonderful. And I think this is the best Hayden's ever been as this character. And he got to really show some chops that some critics might say he didn't get before. And plus he got to sound like the Ontario based farmer that he is. It really came out a few times, that Canadian accent. It just was getting to play all sides of him at this point, and his existence was a good reminder, showing what you're talking about.
Yeah, we'll talk about it more too. But man, that line in that delivery of like, oh, is that what this is about? That whole turning to the dark side and murdering countless people. Is that what this is about? Great Anakin line.
Look, it was after college. I knew a lot of things were going on.
Yeah, who doesn't? Who doesn't? It's basically just, skip year. What? I made a mistake. Any other thoughts on this theme? I have a fun question I want to close out this section with, but I want to make sure that there's room for any other ideas about the Master and Apprentice theme. Jen, anything else you wanted to say?
I mean, I really want to dive into some of the Baylan and Shin of it all, because the flip side of what we're discussing and what you brought up, Jen, I think that's an excellent point you made, Jen, of just a lot of grumpiness going on in the beginning and a lot of fighting between Master and Apprentice. The flip side of that is Baylan and Shin. There's no friction. It is a trusted, well-oiled killing machine. But the moment Shin kind of points her compass in another direction, as we all have kept mentioning in this episode, Baylan realizes this fairy tale world that he heard about is real. He's here now. He's starting to sniff something else in the Force, and he's like, "Hey, kid, pound sand. You're ready. Take your place in the new Empire." And she doesn't even get there.
Yeah.
and you mentioned, Joseph, something about, Ivana Sakno's performance is great. I read, I'm curious about your guys' reactions, because it's all up to maybe interpretation, but I read Shin's last look, holding her blade, her red blade, high above her head, facing the Marauders that I think she might well now be leading. Some people thought maybe she was going down to destroy them. I don't know. I took it as she's leading them. It was a face of fear. She feels abandoned. I would think so. And so instead of being who she is supposed to be, she's now being who she thinks she needs to be, powerful and feared in this moment. And that goes to the flip side, again, going back to the Ahsoka and Sabine of it all, of Sabine is now and Ezra. Look at even Ezra, and he makes his own decision, and he found himself in that process. Sabine's making her own decision. She found herself in that process, just like Ahsoka made her own decision and found herself in that process. The flip side, Anakin made a decision and lost himself in the process, but they all were allowed to. And I think Shin's just literally, figuratively lost in the spiritual wilderness, going, "I think this is what I'm supposed to do." And Baylan's off on his Joshua Tree trip into the desert.
Yeah, it's a look of desperation, and fear. Absolutely. I mean, this was not her plan. I mean, she was on a certain path, and he literally just kicks her out of the nest and basically tells her what she doesn't even know that's what she wants. He's like, "This is really what you want. Go do it." And she's like, "What?" And her reaction in that moment, she's like, "Oh my gosh." And I just felt really bad for her. I felt bad for her in that moment when she's looking down with her blade in the air. I just was like, what a sad tale. Don't go to that side, children.
To me, it was a portrait of the dark side of I have been rejected by Baylan. I have been rejected by Thrawn and Morgan Elsbeth when they just left me to die. Right. The Lightsiders, Ahsoka is reaching a hand out to me, but I don't trust that, because I only know the acquisition of power through fear and domination. So I am going to dominate these Marauders and turn them into my army of power. That's one of my favorite images in the show of her with the red blade raised, because it just feels like this is a little visual poem of what the dark side is. Yeah,
But
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say, I think, Ken, to your point, I think what's really beautiful about that is we've watched lots of stories of the dark side where characters are kind of tried to be pulled back by loved ones. And instead of being pulled back from the edge, she's kind of pushed into it. She's just told by Baylan, I trained you to be something more, but I'm slipping you a little report card that says F-. You didn't become something more. You just want domination. So go get it, kid. I don't care.
Yeah, there was something you could do, and I think there was some supercuts, and this is a very well-received character, Shin Hati. But you could do a supercut of a lot of times in the show, her doing this like, wait, what? She turns, wait, what? Wait, what? And I take that as a choice. I took that as a choice that plays out in the end of, wait, I haven't been taught anything. Like, what?
Right.
This is and it all ends into that moment in this false sense of power out of protection. I think it's almost a survival. All right, I got this blade. This means something. You're all going to fight with me, or going to fight against me if you don't want to.
Yeah. You described their relationship as a well-oiled machine, and it was on a practical, functional level. But the difference was she was clearly just taking whatever he said, being spoon-fed. There were important things that apparently they had not talked about. Important things that she didn't know. So clearly she was just being spoon-fed. So on the surface, a well-oiled machine, whereas this combative, frustrating relationship of pushing, pulling, questioning that Ahsoka and Sabine has ultimately leads to this contrast where Sabine is given the elbow room to choose, and she chooses connection of letting Ezra go. But I feel like for the Master and Apprentice relationship to work, we need to finally listen to Huyang and be together. And I think a triumph of a relationship that is more questioning rather than falling in line.
Yeah, you ever been in a relationship that's particularly one that's maybe romantic, that you're like, this is great, we don't fight, argue, have discussions, it's great, and then you realize, oh yeah, no, that's not great. I think that's the Shin and Baylan thing. Like you said, you're absolutely right. You read my comment right. Of well-oiled machine from afar.
From afar. Yeah. So this is a hopefully fun question. Jennifer, which of the characters in this show would you want to be your mentor?
Not Ahsoka. She keeps too much of a distance. I need a Hera who's going to be like emotionally supportive, give me kind of the tough love that I need, but in a way that's couched in like nurturing kindness. I always look to maternal figures in my life and in my mentors. And so, yeah, it just seems like the most natural fit. And she's a good listener, she's a good mom. I love the little scenes with her and Jason. I thought, great. Yeah, so well done. So well done.
Ken, who would you want to be your mentor? Is it Baylan's beard?
It's Baylan's beard. Those who watched this last week, I did a beard trim up this week because I needed to fix it and maybe look more like Baylan's beard. So I'm working on it. Yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of great characters in here that are beloved and have been loved by us for a long time, including Mothma, the mention of Leia. But I don't know if I choose any of them right now. It might just be Chopper. Chopper might be the guy, but Huyang as well. And Huyang has some, I don't know, I want to say he has some lessons that we can learn from him here into old structures and those kind of things, the present. But I just really liked, he's absolutely one of my favorite characters. And Joseph, if you want to do an 8-hour episode on him, I'm with you.
Nice.
I think this was not just a neat pull forward from the Clone Wars. This was a character that was there with great purpose, and I'd hang out with him and learn lessons from him.
Yeah, I love how organic he is. I love that he has flaws, but he ultimately comes around to, I think, answers that are coded to be good answers, the most important answers he's correct on, and then a little persnickety about some things, but just so ultimately organic. And I love his role also, that for somebody who fears connection but knows she needs it, like Ahsoka, she can kind of lie to herself, like, it's just a droid. Yeah, just a 1,000-year-old droid with more personality than most humans.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd go with Sabine. I really like Sabine in this show, and I feel like she would be a fun mentor who follows the spirit of the rule, not the uptight letter of the rule.
Yeah, it almost has to by nature, both
Yep.
with her Mandalorian ways and now a connection to the Jedi ways. And it
Yep.
has to be different. Love that.
Yeah, it has to be different. All right, we are heading toward our wrap up here. Ken, were there any other big ideas or stakes that you wanted to be sure to mention this episode? Again, we're just scratching the surface, but is there anything really big that you wanted to be sure to mention?
I mentioned up top, but I'll wrap it up with this. I think the idea of all caps, what does it mean to be a Jedi, played out throughout the series based on a lot of what we're talking about here. I think it's just the it's the drive behind the existence of Ahsoka. I think that's Dave is, long, so many interviews and quotes and comments and stuff. And we know he trained under George. And I think Ahsoka created so long ago, but serves that purpose. And at times I've looked at the character and thought, man, she's really right and everyone else is wrong, or at least that's how it's played. And I like this episode was a reversal of that. And I think we're going to come back to that. What does it mean to be a Jedi? That was key with Balin at the beginning. That was the key in the trailer, but also you're right about one thing. We ain't a Jedi. I really like that. And I want to also point out, I just really like the energy of Ezra Imanis Fondi. It was pitch perfect. We're going to discuss the animation to live action kind of stuff later on, putting a pin in that. But I just felt his story survived in a desolate land. I love the big lesson here that we can dive into down the line too, Joseph and Jennifer, is he survived in a desolate land full of marauders that prey on each other. That was very clearly stated. And he survived by breaking that cycle with a group that focuses on protection as their way of life, because that's their choice. And I thought that was beautiful, well played out. And just by the time he shows up, I was tired of the shoegazing emo rock, and he brought in some pub rock that ratcheted it all up.
Yeah, no, I really agree. I think I loved, circle back. We can't leave him alone. That's the answer to somebody being in trouble is, well, if one of us is in trouble, all of us is in trouble, and we'll fight together. And yeah, true to the character of Ezra, and just a great pop of forward movement, energy, positivity. Someone had pointed out in online, and a critic, and I agreed. I think just by happenstance of the stories that are being told on Disney Plus, a lot of our main characters have a reason to be dour, reserved, tragic, brokenhearted. So I think we were all feeling the need for like a Han Solo, young Kenobi, and Phantom Menace zip of personality and flair and fun, and Ezra provided that in such a big way. So I think an important thing to me. Jennifer, how about you? Any other big ideas or stakes that you wanted to discuss?
I think absolutely what does it mean to be a Jedi, and specifically who is allowed to be a Jedi? And I think that Filoni really made it very clear. Anyone can be a Jedi. Anyone can be, we're all connected in the Force. Anyone can be Force sensitive. You don't have to be related to, it's not by bloodline. And I think that that's why I loved The Last Jedi so much, is because it kind of played with that. But this show really hammered that home with Sabine. And I thought that was great. I like it. I like it. Yeah. Shout it to the people in the back.
Yeah, we touched on a little bit the breaking the cycle and different ideas of how to do that. We're set up with the cycle of the Star Wars to continue with Thrawn, and hey, a planet full of Night Sisters. That's amazing. Night Sister corpses right now, but we'll see. There's a lot in the show about fate, in the string of fate, and the Night Sisters, the Great Mothers, looking at things and weaving what was always meant to be with the sudden loose strands, and the whole Sabine was destined to always make this choice. I think there's some interesting things to pull apart there. But the final thing I'll say is echoing the old and the new. If you analyze just the text of the show, we started with longing for the loss, but it's about everybody living in this present time, and how are things going to be different or the same based on our choices. A master and apprentice relationship is by definition the old begetting the new, and how is it going to be different. And I also agree that it is a question about what it is to be a Jedi, but I feel like a lot of those questions in the past have been, what is it to be a Jedi during the prequels when the Order is falling apart? What is it to be a Jedi when you're a Boken Jedi, as they say, when you're abandoned and alone and there's no structure? But But this is now raising this different question that we get to spend time of what is it to be a Jedi now, when we can start fresh and make new choices. And I'm really interested to see that explore. Final thing is meta. It's not just the text, but if you do, as so many of us love discussing, that Filoni is the apprentice to Lucas, who has now become the master, and one of the first shows he makes is about how the now master is haunted by the good and the bad choices of the former master, but now I'm in charge of the new future of not going to violate the old ideas. The old ideas matter, as Hu Yang always says. They do matter, but there's also room for the new. That it makes it not just, here's more Star Wars. There's something personal. There's something real there that's about the real world funneling through a real human being, and that makes it great.
Yeah.
All right. That is our first discussion of Ahsoka. Much more to come. Ken, you want to take us home?
I do. I'm withholding some very fun spirited snark, but we're gonna do that later on. What do you take forward for your masters, Filoni? It's something to ask. All right. Here's where you can find us. Thanks for watching, by the way. This was our first, we decided, this isn't always going to be staring into the camera, talking head pundit show. You're watching us record a podcast. What better way to start that off with me sniffling and coughing and us all muting mics? This is what we're having a lot of fun doing over here. You can find us on Twitter and Threads at ForceCenter Pod, or on Instagram as well. Facebook page is ForceCenter Podcast. We're available on a lot of different spots as a podcast: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Thank you all. We also had a problem recently with our podcast in other countries. The issue supposedly has been worked out. Let us know if there's still an issue. Merch available at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter. And you can support us directly at patreon.com/ForceCenter. You can follow me at Ken Napzok. Go to my website, kennapzok.com. For the holidays, I'll be selling personalized copies of my book, Why We Love Star Wars, through my website. Check for that soon. Also, if you're LA local or heading to LA Comic-Con, I'll be part of this panel. I got to pull it up because the artists behind your favorite characters in a galaxy far, far away. We could not say the word Star Wars, but I will be there moderating the panel with some behind the scenes folks of these very shows. So Sunday, 3 o'clock, LA Comic-Con. Joseph, where can they find and follow you, sir?
Yeah, you can find me on all the social media is at Joseph Scrimshaw, Blue Sky in particular, and Instagram. I'm trying to spend more time at both of those places. If you want to check out the short horror film that I made with several wonderful people this year, it's called The Nightmare Adorable, and there are 2 ways to check it out this coming weekend. If you happen to be in Vegas, or hey, you'll want to be in Vegas, it's playing at the Sin City Horror Fest. In particular, it is showing on Saturday, December 2nd at 4 p.m. I'll be there in Vegas. There'll be a Q&A afterwards. You can get a ticket to just that individual shorts block and just see those shorts. If you're interested in more cosmic horror films, The Nightmare Adorable is going to be part of the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival's online festival, and you can find out all the information by going to hplfilmfestival.com or go to my website for all this information, josephscrimshaw.com.
That's it, Jen. You take us home with where they can find and follow you. I was spending a little bit more time on TikTok this weekend, Jen, and I tried liking every one of your Lisa Frank videos that popped up.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You can find those Lisa Frank videos on TikTok at Jennifer Landa 1138. I'm on Instagram and here on YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube, at Jennifer Landa.
That is it. All right. New era of Force Center begins now. We're taking the old and combining with the new and moving forward. We hope you are as well. We'll see you next time here on Force Center.